Are you filled with fear, doubt, worry about the future of our country? Do you feel the urgency to act before it's too late? If yes, then this podcast is for you. It's time for us to confront the critical issues threatening our nation's fabric, our democracy itself, regardless of our political stance. If you are ready to face reality, handle the tough questions, and find real solutions, then here's your host, Debilyn Molineaux.
Welcome to Terrified Nation, where we dive into the crises, the conflicts, and the choices shaping America's future. I'm your host, Debilyn Molineaux. So history is full of patterns, power struggles, societal shifts, and unexpected figures who shape the course of nations. And today we're exploring one of history's strangest but most powerful figures, eunuchs. I know it sounds bizarre, but trust me, eunuchs were some of the most influential people in history. They shaped empires, they orchestrated political coups, and sometimes they even ruled behind the throne. And the more I dug into their stories, the more I started to wonder, who are the modern eunuchs in American society? Who holds the power, yet remains invisible to most of us? Well, stick with me. This is going to be a wild ride. All right, let's get started. So, some historical context. Because throughout history, eunuchs, and I'm going to use air quotes on that, physically were men who were castrated and therefore excluded from traditional power structures. They became some of the most powerful figures in empires across China, the Middle East, and Europe. Why? Because they weren't seen as a threat. They couldn't start dynasties, they had no biological heirs, and that made them more trustworthy to rulers who feared being overthrown by ambitious noble families. But here's the twist. Because they had no personal legacy to protect, eunuchs also became the master of palace intrigue. They served as advisors and power brokers, and sometimes even puppeteers, pulling the strings behind kings and emperors. So to understand this better, let's talk about three real-life historical figures who defined the power of eunuchs. We're going to talk about Zheng He, who was a Chinese admiral who commanded the world's largest fleet. We're going to visit Eutropius, a eunuch who briefly ruled the Eastern Roman Empire. And lastly, we're going to talk about Eusebius of Caesarea. He was a bishop and historian who shaped Christianity. And then we'll wrap up with Varys, the most famous fictional eunuch whose story in Game of Thrones reflects these historical realities. All right, first up, Zheng He, the admiral who ruled the seas. So Zheng He was born into a Muslim family in China's Yunnan province, and at a very young age, he was captured, castrated, and sent to serve in the imperial court of the Ming dynasty. Most people in that position would have faded into obscurity. Most did, but not Zheng He. Instead, he became the greatest naval commander in Chinese history. Under Emperor Yongle, he led the famous treasure fleet. This was an armada of over 300 ships and 28,000 sailors. And to put that in perspective, Columbus's fleet to the Americas just had 3 tiny ships. Now, Zheng He's fleet was more like the aircraft battle groups of today, traveling across the Indian Ocean. He reached Africa, the Middle East, possibly even the Americas. And in those travels, he spread Chinese influence, made trade agreements, and projected Chinese power across the world, all as a eunuch who, by traditional standards, should never have been in power at all. And after Zheng He's death, the Chinese government abruptly shut down its maritime expansion and it turned inward. The fleet was dismantled, and Europe was allowed to rise as the dominant naval power instead of China. The lesson here is that even the most powerful insiders can disappear when political winds change. All right, second up on our list, Eutropius. This is the eunuch who ruled Rome. So we're going to fast forward to the late 4th century AD, and the Roman Empire was in turmoil, and this unlikely figure rose to power, Eutropius. Eutropius was a eunuch who went from being a lowly servant to ruling the Eastern Roman Empire. He was born a slave, and he was castrated at a young age. See a pattern here? And then he found himself in the court of Emperor Arcadius. Through court intrigue and manipulating alliances, he became the emperor's most trusted advisor, effectively controlling the empire. Kind of a little string pulling going on here. He even led a military campaign against the Huns, proving that eunuchs could wield power in more than just politics. And in 399 AD, he became the first eunuch to be named consul, which in Rome was one of the highest ranking positions. But as quickly as he rose, he also fell. His enemies included powerful generals and aristocrats who turned against him, and he was arrested, exiled, and then executed. So Eutropius' story shows that eunuchs could hold real political power, and their lack of family ties also meant that they had no safety net when things went wrong. All right, last of the real eunuchs is Eusebius, and he's an historian who has shaped not just an empire, but the world we know. So Eusebius of Caesarea was not a physical eunuch, but he was an outsider, someone who appeared powerless and ended up shaping the most powerful empire in the world, Rome. So he was a bishop and a historian and a theologian who became a close advisor to Emperor Constantine. And he played this crucial role in the Council of Nicaea in 325, which defined Christianity. His writings, especially the life of Constantine, influenced how Christianity merged into Roman politics and turned it from a persecuted faith into the empire's official religion. One that I might add is still standing 1700 years later. So Eusebius never ruled Rome, but his ideas that helped shape the Roman Catholic Church continues to influence the world today, including our lives. So like eunuchs, he wasn't the king, but he shaped the king's choices. All right, last up, we're going to bring this idea into pop culture and talk about Varys the spider from the Game of Thrones. So if you've watched Game of Thrones, Varys was the ultimate power broker. Kings and queens came and went, Varys remained. And Varys was a eunuch who served these multiple rulers, and his true loyalty was never to any one ruler, but to the realm. He worked behind the scenes, gathering intelligence, manipulating political outcomes, and most importantly, making sure the realm survived, even if kings and queens came and went, as they did. And one of his most famous lines was, "Power resides where men believe it resides." And that's it, right there, the whole point of today's episode. Power is not always in the hands of the obvious rulers. The real players are often in the shadows, influencing decisions we don't even realize are being made. So who are the Varyses of today? Is it the unelected bureaucrats and government agencies, as part of our country believes, that needs to be dismantled? Is it the tech giants controlling what we see and read through algorithms? Well, we've got that argument to be made too. Is it the wealthy donors who are funding both sides of our elections, just trying to control the laws that are getting made by our elected officials? Well, like Varys, all of these people don't run for office. They don't stand at the podium, but maybe they're the ones making the real moves. So I don't know who the eunuchs are in American society. And of course, I don't mean physical eunuchs, But I would love to hear from you, your perspective on who is wielding power that we can't see. And please comment on our social media posts or find us at terrifiednation.com and use the contact form to reach us. In the meantime, thank you for joining me on today's Terrified Nation. If you found this episode thought-provoking, please share it with a friend and leave a review, and let's keep the conversation going. You can find us on social media at Terrified Nation. Join me next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Terrified Nation. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to subscribe to the show. You can get advance notice of new episodes and bonus content by signing up. Head over to terrifiednation.com and join us on the next episode.